A pleasure to meet all at last. And for today's piece relating to films I should have talked about years ago, I'd say we are in the leagues of getting to some of the more obscured bits, but at the same time, they're regarded as more cult followings, if you will. I might spend a few episodes in particular talking about these sort of films that of course got pretty poor ratings and poor financial runs in the box office, but since then, they have grown up to be probably some of the most liked films of the 90s, for instance. Because for 1997, Good Burger actually has gotten a lot of following since then. And nearly 30 years later, there actually has since been a sequel to Good Burger, which of course is a Paramount Plus exclusive. So for now, I'll just put my attention towards the first film. The one that started it all. The Good Burger, in which that it's the home of the Good Burger, with the Burgermobile in mind, and of course, with the young man behind it all, Ed. He, of course, is one of a kind in terms of actors. Well, for characters by any case, though. Still, nonetheless, it's worth noting that Kel Mitchell was able to play up Ed to an incredible degree. I mean, you got the somewhat contorted vocal cords that he has. I don't know if it was because he spent a lot of time singing songs or whatnot, but either way, this kind of raspiness to his voice is a bit of a way to set up the tone for the character. And overall, Ed is just insane. He runs his job as a cashier for the most part, and actually does run late, but luckily he is able to fill in for a guy's order before he starts to pull the plug and threaten to sue the company. And even when he does so, the guy just walks away and leaves. So, talk about pure irony. Oh, but that's not all though, because he basically rollerbladed his way there. And in doing so, there was essentially someone's car that gets hit. Well, it turns out that there is another character who becomes of vital importance. The driver of the first car is basically Dexter Reed. And there is, of course, another car that is actually driven by a teacher named Mr. Wheat, played by the one and only Sinbad. Yeah, so if you remember when I talked about Jingle All the Way, that also was a film starring Sinbad. But there's a lot of others I could probably talk about as well from the late 90s. Anyways, though, Mr. Wheat gets pretty mad at Dexter for messing up his car, and basically issues him a bill that is, of course, around $2,000. I mean, for 1997, that was pretty expensive. But one can only imagine how much that would equate to today. In 2026 money, how would you think $2,000 would amount to after 29 long years, going on 30? Well, in any case though, it's up to Dexter Reed to go and get himself a job throughout the summer in order to pay off the bills for the wreck. So what does he do? He goes for a rivaling burger company called Mondo Burger. Now, Mondo Burger is a bit of a difference compared to Good Burger. Good Burger is, of course, the old-fashioned, yet still good, simple-tasting stuff that keeps many people coming back for more. And there's a lot of local burger joints I've known here in the state of Wisconsin, one of which that I remembered so well over the years is Cops in Brookfield. But Good Burger, unfortunately, is starting to face serious competition with Mondo Burger, mainly because Mondo Burger has much bigger patties. And they also have a well-trained team all suited up in fancy attire. And they're all led by one pretty horrifying, spiky-haired dude named Kurt Boswell. He is, of course, played by Jan Schwederman, and does pack quite the attitude. He even does treat some of his employees like crap. Meanwhile, Mr. Bailey, the boss behind Good Burger, played by Dan Schneider, he himself actually has a good faith and a good heart in spite of his large size. But with all the stuff that's going around between both companies, who truly comes out as the victor? Well, at first, Good Burger is starting to face a lot of rivalry from Mondo Burger, and it gets to the point where Mondo Burger is truly starting to take over the many business practices that Good Burger has been doing for years. And for the most part, these larger patties that they use to put in their burgers has been leading up to many more people coming around. And especially grand opening day proved to be a big part of the problem. They had little to no customers almost all day long in the days following, and it seemed that they were eventually going to have to close their doors. But even Ed himself was more than determined to get the restaurant back on track without losing any finances and the business itself. So he and Dexter plan on going out by putting together the Burger Mobile. They of course take it out for a spin, and a lot of their delivery runs seem to run pretty well until a certain epiphany kicks in. Well, Dexter and Ed of course are on lunch break, and despite the problems they've had with each other, they accidentally create something unique. A sauce. You see, it's a special recipe that Ed himself had actually concocted, but was more or less hoping to have it be kept a secret recipe. When Dexter finds out about this though, he realizes that it actually has the power to really bring in new customers. This so-called Ed sauce is actually going to be the true epiphany to get the company back on its feet again and hopefully take down Mondo Burger. Because with their ever-growing empire worth of massive patties, it was hard to imagine how Good Burger could possibly stay alive for this long. Well, the secret sauce formula has come around, thankfully without much secrets having to be revealed. Ed of course is put in charge of making the sauce, and he does so with a really big stockpot in mind. That's how addictive the people are to this new sauce, if you will. And it's also up to him to ensure that the secret does not get out, even though Kurt Boswell finds out about this little thing, and that the secret sauce is apparently to blame for taking away some of his own business. So, a few failed attempts, including a girl by the name of Roxanne. Man, this was a while before a security breach was even a thing. Nonetheless though, even she couldn't do anything about it. Even a night well spent with Kurt just didn't quite work out all too well. Ed and Dexter were just very much unwilling to give up the secret, thanks to some carefully planned tactics and even a few last-minute decisions, including the fact that Roxanne got her butt kicked. Oh man, you know you're gonna have a good day when a bad lady gets her butt kicked in public. Still, nonetheless though, in spite of the relationship that Roxanne was able to form with Ed, it seems that Ed is still unwilling to give up the secret recipe. And as for Dexter, he of course has his own little guys put around, as a co-worker by the name of Monica is basically with him on that same night. Dexter, as you can see, is trying his best to keep the secret from getting out. And the sauce itself is not to fall into the wrong hands, especially not Kurt. But they really start to put it all together. Because what eventually happens is that both Ed and Dexter eventually decide to break into Mondo Burger by going in through the roof in the chimney and getting into the kitchen, in which that they can find out what exactly is making the patty so huge. It turns out that there is an illegal chemical being used. A chemical that normally should be buried under the ground by the government, but apparently is being brought in tankfuls by the box. Seriously, there's entire canisters of this stuff that's being used to pump directly into the burger patties, which of course allows their size to amplify. This of course is what brings up the so-called idea of massive burger patties being put into the burgers that brings out the addictive taste and scent that keeps all the people coming in for more Mondo Burger. Yeah. But even when they do have a plan to get this chemical out of the plant, and out of the kitchen and out of the restaurant entirely, they're still caught by Kurt. And as a result, they end up getting sent to an insane asylum. Eventually, there comes a point in which that Kurt sends some of his goons into Good Burger after it closes, and there's of course an old co-worker by the name of Otis, played by Abe Vigoda, who spots them and is eventually sent to the same asylum as the two had been originally. So now with three of our big characters being thrown out, if you will, the thing is, they're in quite the pickle. They have only a limited amount of time before the sauce, which is now laced with poison that the goons managed to drop a few in before they left without being detected. They gotta get their way back to Good Burger before it opens and stop anybody from eating the burgers with the sauce, or else they'll be poisoned to death. And this is quite the setup that's going on. A classic case of framery in which that the company itself is not to blame, but the rivaling company, Mondo Burger, and Kurt Boswell himself, which he had, of course, had quite the plan to set up. And even though they had to jump through a lot of hoops and even convince a few people here and there, a special dance party is hosted in the asylum itself, hilariously set up by Ed himself, though it's quite unsurprising, given his personality. They of course make their escape by jumping through the window of the upper level, and they make their run for it, hijacking an ice cream truck, and eventually once they make their way back to Good Burger, they are very quick to stop the personnel from eating one of the burgers. Of course, another plan to get into Mondo Burger to prove what was going on in there, and hopefully to avert any of the crisis that was happening because of the poison sauce. Even though it ensues, there is just as much trouble going on for Ed and Dexter as they try to sneak away one of the canisters. And well, they unintentionally blow the place up after too much of the substance gets into the burgers and causes the whole kitchen to go kablooey. However, Ed was actually quick to put one of the canisters into his outfit, and when he pulls it out and shows it to the cops who arrive on the scene, Kurt Boswell is easily taken away into custody, along with some of his employees, concluding Mondo Burger is an illegal operation made to use illegal substances as ways of improving patty formula, structure, and taste. And with that, Good Burger comes to an end in a rather satisfying way. Even though Ed can be quite bumbling and quite idiotic at times, he is unintentionally the town hero, although not much was basically given to him in that sort of attention. He of course was cleared of any wrongdoing for what happened to Mondo Burger, along with Dexter. Meanwhile, Dexter of course gets another visit from Mr. Wheat, again played by Sinbad if anybody hasn't already figured it out yet. And essentially, he was actually caught up in the whole mess. Part of the structure in Mondo Burger landed on his car, pretty much crushing it. And so, Dexter, of course, sends off Mr. Wheat with his own message, jokingly telling him that he is hopefully cleared up of any fees or funds that need to be given to Mr. Wheat to fix up the car, because now apparently Mondo Burger's the one to blame for his car getting wrecked. Still, this was quite an impressive film, and it's probably no wonder why they made a sequel of it. I can't be sure if I'm gonna watch it anytime soon, so I'm gonna be sticking to more of the more cult following type of films, in which that they're usually a lot older and they perform pretty badly in most ways, but have since been looked on as good films. Because tomorrow I'm gonna be doing that again with another film in mind, so here we go. Stick around for more stuff, and as always, I'll see you then.